They remember VHS tapes. They remember the sudden dawn of the wireless internet. And while the professionals are still arguing about where exactly they sit in the modern framework, if you were born between 1976 and 1985, you already know the truth. You are the fading tail of Generation X. You are the neighbor to the Millennials. Yet you don't really fit into either box, no matter how hard the media tries to push you inside. Roughly 10 years ago, academics gave you a name, the Xennial. Some anthropologists call this a micro-generation because the window of your upbringing was so incredibly brief. But what happened inside that specific stretch of history? It forged a mindset that changed everything. So today, we're going to uncover what makes this collective so fascinating from a developmental angle. Know what I mean? It's like, we're the only ones who remember the world before the always-on button was pressed. But let's look closer. Think back. You spent your formative years in a purely analog world. Boredom wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a standard state of mind you just had to endure. You memorized phone numbers. You carried them in your head like secret codes. And if you weren't home when your favorite show started, that was it. That episode was gone forever. In those days, missing a show was like watching a bird fly away. You could describe its colors to your friends, sure, but you could never bring it back to the branch. Then, suddenly, just as you were crossing the threshold into adulthood, the world went digital. It wasn't a gradual time. It was like the lights of a massive stadium being flipped on all at once while you were still learning to walk in the dark. That timing? It created ripple effects that are still visible in who you are today. Most people are raised in one era, but Xennials? You navigated two different realities during the exact years your identity was being forged. Your late teens felt like one planet. Your mid-20s felt like another. And that gap in experience, it's wider than almost any other generation has ever had to bridge. Think about high school, passing folded paper notes in the hallway, deep conversations that simply vanished into the air the moment they were over. If you made plans, you showed up. No "where are you" texts. No "running late" updates. You trusted the circle trusted you. It required a level of focus we can barely imagine now. But then you hit 20. Mobile devices became universal. You signed up for Friendster. You migrated to MySpace. Finally, you landed on Facebook. Before the platforms, you had 3 ways to find someone: the landline, the office, or knocking on their front door. Suddenly, you were juggling 15 different chat apps, and you just intuitively figured it out. You inhabited both realities, and science explains why. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that masters new systems, doesn't stop evolving until you're 25. A study in Nature Neuroscience confirms it. This means Xennials were still in a window of high neurological plasticity right when the world was being rebuilt. It was like a city installing its first fiber optic nervous system while the concrete of the streets was still wet and impressionable. You were young enough for gadgets to feel like instinct, but old enough to keep a vivid internal map of the world that existed before them. Gen Xers can be cynical about tech. They saw it arrive too late. Millennials? They have no memory of the before times. But if you're a Xennial, you have technological bilingualism. It's a rare gift. You can have a deep, face-to-face talk without the itch to check your notifications every 30 seconds. But you aren't paralyzed by a new operating system either. You remember being unreachable for a whole afternoon, and you aren't afraid of it. This shows up in ways you might not even notice, like your boundary with privacy. You grew up when your cringiest moments were written in disappearing ink on a summer breeze. They weren't etched into a digital granite wall that never lets you forget. That bad haircut? That breakup? That house party? There is no high-def evidence. It only lives in the stories. This creates a different bond with your own past. Your memories were allowed to be fluid. They could grow. They could turn into legends. That is how the human brain is designed to work. You weren't held hostage by digital documentation. Science says our autobiographical memory is meant to be flexible. We are hardwired to curate our lives, to keep the meaning and let the trivial details blur. But when every second is recorded, that organic process becomes distorted. We are still trying to map out what that does to the soul. But here is where it gets heavy. You entered the workforce in the shadow of 2008, the economic collapse. You were trying to build a career foundation while the ground was shaking. That timing matters. Economic psychology shows that financial trauma at that age leaves lasting mental imprints. It rewires how you see wealth, security, and risk. So, you have this group. You can pivot through a technological revolution, but you also hit a financial landslide just as you were trying to plant your first garden. You built your future on ground that felt like it could give way at any second. You handle change because you have to, but there's that quiet, underlying whisper in the back of your mind. What if it all breaks again? The media frames this as Gen X versus Millennials, a monolith. But your birth years, those lightning-fast cultural shifts, created something else, something distinct. Xennials navigate a paradox. You have the self-sufficiency of Gen X. You grew up before helicopter parenting was a thing. Your parents didn't know where you were for hours, and that was fine. You learned to process frustration and fix your own problems without anyone stepping in to fix it. Yet, you also grew up in the golden age of the web, back when we thought tech would save the world, before we realized it might just be making us more stressed. Independent, yet cooperative. Skeptical, yet hopeful. Digital, yet analog. The Xennial knows how to balance contradictions. You remember the before and the after. You can see exactly what was gained and exactly what was sacrificed. You aren't drowning in nostalgia. You love the convenience of today, but unlike the younger ones, you know what we traded away to get here. Honestly, looking back at it all now, I wonder if we even realized the door was closing behind us. It makes you think, doesn't it? We traded away the deep, silent well of a long afternoon for the frantic, shallow flickering of a world that demands an answer every 10 seconds. You lost the ability to be truly alone with your thoughts. You lost the patience that only comes from waiting. You lost that specific presence that only exists when there isn't a device in your pocket competing for your attention. But you gained a world of possibilities. You gained access to knowledge and connectivity your younger self couldn't even dream of. If you're a Xennial, you're caught in the middle, standing on the bridge between two worlds. That isn't a mistake. That is your identity. In a society transforming faster than we can track, having survived a cultural metamorphosis is your greatest skill. You are an expert at living in transition. The Xennial story matters, not because you're better, but because you navigated a moment in history that taught you something the rest of us are still trying to grasp. You are the bridge, one foot on the solid earth of the past, the other reaching for the stars of the future. And even when the river beneath you turns from water into data, you're still standing.